I hoped I could become a storyteller and a writer, but I didn't know. And I'd always planned to go to college, and I was going to go to college, but I finally realized, I have to find out if I can be a success with this book, because I can always go to school later, but I can never publish this book at this age ever again. I only have one chance of doing this. Personally, I've always enjoyed reading fantasy, and I've always enjoyed stories and telling stories. So that was always part of who I was. But I also had the advantage, I guess, of having parents who were very supportive of that and who always read books to me and my sister when we were growing up. Also, they took the time to homeschool me and my sister. And I know that's not something that's done in Germany, but in the US it's a little bit more common. Also, I do think that some of our attitude is very Italian as well. That comes from my dad's side of the family. But the reason they were self-employed was that desire to keep the family together. So when I gave them the manuscript for Eragon, they didn't have any jobs to quit. They simply decided we were going to focus on the book as a family, and therefore they didn't work on any other projects that they would have been working on otherwise. And as a result, by the time we self-published Eragon, if the book had taken another 3 to 4 months to start turning a profit, we were going to have to sell our house, move to a city, and all get regular jobs. So it was an extraordinary risk. All of this was just an attempt to keep the family together and to support each other and to have a family business, something of our own that we could pursue and build and not be dependent on anyone else for success or failure. 3 words for what it means to be an author: persistence, curiosity, and persistence. There are plenty of people who have great skill at writing, but who remain unpublished because they don't have the persistence to get through a manuscript. There's this myth of the great literary genius that comes out of nowhere and somehow knows everything about writing from the very start. And I don't really buy that. It really is like a musical instrument. You practice your writing and you gain, your ability that way. And the more you practice, the better you get. I actually have written more of this series on my sofa than I ever have at a desk or anything. There's something about, I think that people do their best work either standing up or laying down. I don't know, I just get very comfortable and the writing is much easier that way. Just sitting in a chair doesn't work too well for me, although I've done it. Why consistency? Because if you create an imaginary world and you set up certain rules in the first book, and even in that book or in later books, if you break those rules, you break the reader's faith in the story and in the world. And then the readers will feel that nothing's ever at stake anymore. The characters are never in danger, because whenever they're really in danger, they can break the rules somehow and wiggle out of the trap that they're in or the danger they're in. Because you're dealing with things that don't exist, dragons and magic and dwarves and elves, you have to treat them as realistically and consistently as possible for the reader to treat them as if they're real. For me, plotting and writing is like music. It's very hard to compose a piece of music while you're performing it. So first you compose it, and then you can concentrate on performing it as beautifully as possible. And that, for me, is the difference between plotting and writing. One's composing and one's performing. It's an odd profession because I'll spend 2-3 years in my room typing away all alone, and then every now and then Random House kicks me out the front door and says, okay, go stand in front of a couple thousand people and give a presentation. And it's 2 totally separate skills. And actually, the self-publishing helped teach me how to present and speak in public, because at that time, books sold meant food on the table. And that is an incentive like no other. So, I did events in medieval costume. I did events in supermarkets, grocery stores. I arm wrestled a guy one time to get him to buy a copy of the book. There was this guy who came to my table, and he wasn't really sure if he wanted to buy the book. So I said to him that if I challenged him to arm wrestling, and that if I beat him at arm wrestling, he had to buy a copy of the book. And I beat him, and he read the book. So, unfortunately, I told this story a few times on book tour, and I had lots of young men then coming up and challenging me to arm wrestle them. I did beat all of them, but I had to stop doing that because I kind of blew out my arm, and I was having trouble signing the books after all the arm wrestling. So no more arm wrestling on tour. If my voice were 2 octaves lower, I'd do the audiobook, I think. If I sounded like Christopher Lee, I think I'd read the audiobook myself. But no, I mean, I enjoy doing readings, and I think I do them well, at least at signings and events. But the people who read the audiobooks are professionals. That's what they do for their living, and they're able to bring certain skills and techniques and experience to it that I can't bring. So I'm happy to leave it to the professionals. I know I've watched Andreas read before. I've also watched Gerard Doyle, who read the English audiobooks as well. And each time it's very odd. They both do an excellent job reading the books, but listening to them for me is kind of like being in a dream where things are very familiar and yet very strange at the same time. I believe that destiny is 99% hard work and 1% incredible luck. So if you want, you need to be ready for your destiny, because sometimes it comes knocking, and if you haven't prepared for it, it can pass you by. Now that the inheritance cycle is finished, I'm really wanted to take this opportunity to meet with the fans one last time for this series, and to meet those I hadn't had a chance to meet before, and answer their questions and sign their books, and hopefully give them a fun time while they're at my events.